So rates is the topic of this video, and when we're talking about rates, we're going to be talking later on about this word called slope, and that's going to be a rate all the time. But rate before we talk about slope is when you talk about anything with the word per. So you say A per B. For example, you are probably used to looking at miles per hour, right? And when you have it written this way, what you're saying is if you're going 60 miles per hour, is usually how I write that one. What that means is if you go 1 hour, you would travel 60 miles. Okay? And so it's really nice to reduce things down to that because then you can really understand what you're looking at. Sometimes, let's say I look at a sale at the store and they have, Gatorade on sale or whatever. A lot of times what I'll reduce it down to is price per bottle so that I know how much it is per bottle and decide if I think that's a good sale or not. Okay. When we do that and we reduce it down to just a 1 on the bottom, 1 bottle, price per 1 bottle, price or miles per 1 hour, miles per 1 gallon, that kind of thing. What we're doing is we're reducing it down to what's called a unit rate. So let's say I went on a trip and I drove, let's say I drove 360 miles and it took me, let's say 6 hours. That's a rate. And I can identify it as a rate off the bat because I have a fraction. And then on the top I have a unit and on the bottom I have a different unit. So on the top I have miles, the bottom I have hours, so I know it's a rate. But it's not a unit rate because I have a number other than 1 on the bottom. And so this doesn't mean much to us. And if it does mean something to you, then that means you've already turned it into a unit rate. Because what you're going to do is you're going to take top divided by bottom. So 360 divided by 6 is 60. And now you have 60 miles and a 1 on the bottom, 1 hour. Okay, so basically what you did is you said 6 goes into 6 once, 6 goes to 360 60 times, right? And you've got 60 on top, 1 on bottom, so you get 60 miles per hour. And by putting in that unit rate, I now know how fast I drove. I drove pretty decently fast. If I had done this and got 20 miles per hour, then I would know I was driving really, really slow. And so that's the basis for rate. A lot of times you have two rates set equal to each other, and we call that a proportion. Okay, so if you see like 2/3 equals 6/9, we call that a proportion. And usually we set a proportion when we have a little situation and a big situation, and we have a rate for each of those, and we set up a proportion there. Okay, another proportion that we like to set up is when we talk about percents. Okay, so when we talk about percents, the idea is on a percent, you have some number out of 100. Okay, you have some number, and that's your percent right there. So if it was 20%, I'd put a 20 there. And 20% of something is only 20 out of 100, so it's not very much. And on the other thing, what you mean is maybe it's not out of 100. Maybe originally it was out of 40. And so this down here is your total, because this is the total amount you have. This is your total percent, and the biggest percent you can get is 100. So you set up your two fractions with the total on the bottom. And then on the top is the part that you have. So if let's say you had 8 out of 40, right? So then you would have the part you have is 8, the total you have is 40, and then it's your job to try and figure out what is that percent, right? How can I look at that? How can I figure out what percent that is? And we figure that out a couple different ways. Okay? And so, yeah, that's pretty much it. We do have unit conversions. So a unit conversion is saying, what if you had, looking for an example here quick. If you checked your heartbeat and you had 72 heartbeats in 1 minute, the question is, how much would you have in 1 hour? Okay, so what you're doing is you're going to set up what we call a conversion factor. So I'm going to multiply by a fraction. And what I want to happen is I want my minutes to cancel out and become hours, right? Because you're asking how many heartbeats in 1 hour. So how can I change minutes into hours? The first thing you want to do is set up an equation. I know that there's 60 minutes in 1 hour, so that's your first job. Figure out an equation that is true about your minutes and hours or whatever you're working with, the two things that the thing you're trying to get rid of and the thing you're trying to replace it with. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to put 60 minutes on the top. And the reason I'm doing that is because now I have that cross-canceling, this minute and minute cancel. And so I've gotten rid of the minutes. But then what I need to do is I need to take the other side of my equation and put that on the bottom or wherever I have left. In this case, I have the bottom left. Okay, and the reason this works is because if you look at this fraction right here, this is really just 1, right? 60 minutes over 1 hour, because they're equal, when I put one on top of the other, it's like I'm saying 3 over 3 or 10 over 10. I'm saying that they're the same exact thing, and remember, these always cancel out to be 1. So this is just multiplying by 1, and anything times 1 just stays itself. So that's really nice for us, because my minutes cancel out, so now I'm just left with hours, and I can do the math, multiply across the top. Oh boy, now I have to do that math. 42, 43 over 1, and multiply across the bottom, 1, 1. And then if I look at my units, I have heartbeats on top and hours on bottom. So that's how many heartbeats you would have in 1 hour. So that's the idea of making, changing units. So units are just those labels on things. So if you're trying to change feet into yards or feet into miles or inches into feet or minutes into hours and things like that, that's what you're going to do is set up this 1 here. How can you set up that 1?